Hi, this is Paul. Some of you know I have a little sub-channel called Vander Clips, where I'll often just drop clips from other videos that I want to mark and preserve and just be able to grab. I grabbed 3 videos from the Rafe Kelly, John Vervaeke conversation, which I thought was really very good. And I also grabbed a couple of videos from Scott Adams. Somebody sent me a link to Scott Adams' video, and I thought it was very interesting. Now, he made a video in which he was depressed, and then he made a video the next day basically saying it was his blood pressure meds. But if in vino veritas is true, there's also a degree of truth when you're both manic and when you're depressed. Now, there's it goes in different ways, but this was quite the
All right.
video.
Uh,
One of the things that was interesting was that he couldn't focus the camera, or because the next day when it was, part of me watched this video and wondered, is this Scott Adams psyops? I honestly wondered, because he's a very smart guy. He's very psychologically aware. He's always talking about hypnosis. That was sort of the whole metric through which he sort of launched himself on social media with Donald Trump, and of course now he's on there every day with his coffee and just giving his hot takes about the news and all his ideas. And he's become a pretty substantial YouTuber. But let's just play it and hear what he has to say.
well, I would say that I would still rank
Now, for those of you who don't know, he's usually reading the live chat.
myself as depressed. Now that I have a better idea what that feels like. But don't you think some people should not be happy? Am I
Now, should, it's a really funny word, and in this case, should not be happy, should be happy. Uh, this is an amazing little 10 minutes of video, 8 minutes of video.
wrong about that? Aren't some people in legitimately in a bad situation and there's no reason to be happy about it?
Now if you read stuff about depression, this has sort of been this has sort of been taken into account, that if someone, let's say, is grieving, or they've had a significant loss, or they have some significant challenges, their depressed mood is sort of anticipated. And of course, that's part of what he's saying here, is that, well, if your externalities are bad, being sad is appropriate. I think that's true.
I mean, if you're in an iron lung,
Now, when he said that example, I thought of Dale Cooper, who was the chaplain at Calvin College when I was there. And I don't know, there might be even an article out there about it. Anyway, I didn't find a piece about his mother. This is Dale Cooper. He was the chaplain in the years that I was at Calvin. And growing up, his mother was in an iron lung. And, to a degree, when Scott Adams is talking about this, we all sort of, maybe not all of us, people often understand. It's not unusual, it's not uncommon knowledge to know that winning the lottery makes you happy for a little time, and then you go back sort of to normal, and probably being consigned to an iron lung will make you depressed, and then after a while you will sort of go back to normal. And so part of Dale Cooper's faith journey involved his mother in an iron lung and his father's ongoing devotion to her to keep the marriage together, to raise the children. And I think they even lived on a farm. I mean, so for Dale Cooper, that iron lung in his faith life was a huge part of what gave him faith, watching the heroism of his parents. Yeah, when he was 3 years old, his mother contracted polio and never left the iron lung to which he was confined. Cooper's dad quit his job as an onion farmer and spent the next 39 years at her side. The experience shaped his life. Today, reflecting on a career as a pastor of a college students, he said, "To be given the privilege of being able to enter the arena of human pain, in my case, with younger people at Calvin College, students were in the hospital or bereaved. They were certainly among my most fulfilling parts of my ministry." And he would preach regularly at the college services. And one of the things I remember, because he said it so often, and it stuck with me even as a college student listening to sermons, pain shared is pain divided. And he really lived this. So when Scott Adams mentioned an iron lung, I thought, I'm not sure exactly you know what you're talking about. But this has everything to do, again, with, well, we'll talk about the Christian faith, because I made a tweet about this.
And you're depressed about it. Should you seek help? Or are you just being realistic?
Now the seek help is key here, because when I play the second video, that gets mentioned. And probably he was feeling depressed. Friends and family around him probably told him to seek help. He was probably denying help. That's not an uncommon part of depression. Depression, the door is often locked from the inside, unfortunately.
I'll tell you what it was that got me. You know how we all live in a bubble of subjective reality, right? We walk around in a little bubble because we would go insane if we didn't. So you put a little protective bubble around you, and you tell yourself a bunch of bullshit that isn't true. Some of the bullshit that you tell yourself is that you can...
Okay, now, even though he's depressed, what he's talking about here is not unfaithful to his perspective on life. And it's sort of says that, well, here we are, we're tiny little creatures. In order to deal with, and this is very existentialist, in order to deal with the great amount of unknown danger around us, we construct for ourselves little stories. And he might go on to say, well, Christians, that's one little story that people construct for themselves in order to hold at bay the intense amounts of danger and anxiety that life throws at them.
Trust everybody, bubble around you, and you tell yourself a bunch of bullshit that isn't true. Some of the bullshit that you tell yourself is that you can trust everybody that you think you can trust. If you didn't tell yourself that, you couldn't live in the world.
Now, this is a dark perspective.
You couldn't live in a world where you trusted nobody. But what is closer to the truth? You can trust everybody that you think you can trust, or that you can trust nobody. Which of those is closer to actual reality? Sadly, the one that's closer to actual reality, usually once you get out of family connections, as soon as you're out of the family, blood connection, because I do...
Now, it's kind of funny that he says that, because many of you know people who have family members that you can't trust or won't trust or will selectively trust. So the fact that he sort of isolates family in this group, where it is interesting, even though, on average, perhaps family members you're more able to trust your family members than non-family members, but that's by no means self-evident either.
Trust my family members completely, 100%. But because my family members would do the right thing if nobody was watching. I don't know. Are you lucky enough to have family members like that? I could say with 100% certainty that my siblings would do the right thing in almost any situation when nobody was watching.
Now that's a wonderful thing to have. I know a guy whose sister tried to take his inherited house from her, and his brother did all kinds of illegal things, and every time he got arrested, he always gave his brother's name. And so this one particular individual, he's got a lot of trust issues, and for good reason.
I can say that with certainty. But I can't say that about just about anybody else. There are people
and this is getting sad now.
Suspect would, right? Like, I have a friend who, if you asked me to bet on it, I would bet he would do the right thing every time if nobody was watching. But I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure. So here's what happened to me in the past years. I'd say the past year or so. That matrix-like mask kind of fell off, and I lost my illusion for a while. So being depressed...
Now that is such a fascinating thing to say, because, again, At least at this moment. Now, he's going to be a lot better the next day, which is a good thing. At this moment, he's basically saying, life is horrible. You need fantasies to get through it. What's the cause of my current sadness? The mask has fallen off and I'm seeing the world as it really is.
Is not about being in the wrong state of mind, which is the problem. In my case, being depressed was in being in the right state of mind. That's the fucked up part. The part that made me depressed is when I saw things clearly. And I worked since then to rebuild my illusions. So when you ask me if I'm feeling better or depressed, I'm sort of in the process of rebuilding an illusion that I can live in without pain.
Now it's really important to remember what he's saying here when we get to the next video. Because right now he is looking at the world and saying, I see the world clearly. I am rationally constructing for myself the illusions that make life bearable. This is the truth, the foundational, fundamental truth of the world. Period.
And I'm not quite there yet, because I can still see too much ugly. And I can't live happily in a world with this much ugly around me. I don't mean physically ugly, I mean, ugly ideas and thoughts and stuff. And I'm trying as hard as I can to rebuild like a protective, imaginary shield of everything's fine when it isn't.
I mean, even just listen to the tenor of his voice right there.
It isn't. But, you have to build up a little wall of imaginary protection. So I'm building up a little wall of imaginary protection as efficiently as I can. But it's hard work. All right. And then physically, I haven't figured out how to fix my physical problem. So exercise, I don't know if I'll ever be able to exercise again.
Catch ever there.
So let me just give you an idea. It's possible that I will never have another personal relationship for the rest of my life. It's possible.
Now, I don't know much about Scott's track record of personal relationships. In the back of my mind, he's divorced I don't know how many times. I don't know what the status is. I don't know. I'm sure some of you are big Scott Adams fans, and you'll fill me in the comment section, I'm sure. So thank you for that in advance.
That I'll never exercise again for the rest of my life. Because that's my current physical.
And again, if you talk to a person who's pretty depressed, this is what it sounds like.
Physical situation. Now, it could be that I can work through those things and everything will be fine. I mean, I could be better by next week. But the length of time it's been, and the fact that I don't even have a clue of what's wrong, and I'm at that certain age where things will fall apart, suggest that I could be at the end of my life. And on top of that...
Now, whether this is true of him right now, to state the most obvious, we all get to this point. Whether he's at that point now, we will all get there. Given enough time, it comes.
Feeling physically that I'm literally at the end of my life. The responsibility that one has at a certain level of life is that all of my daily decisions have to do with my lifespan now. Like if I thought I would get another dog, I think, shit, dog lives 15 years. I don't know. I don't like those odds because I wouldn't want to get a dog that outlived me.
Why?
So it's really, until you get to a certain age, if you're younger and you're listening to this, there are some real psychological challenges you have to get past. Now, I think
that's very true.
Probably easier if you got a big family situation, because then your family is your whole situation.
Notice how often family comes up in this video. It's very interesting.
That's probably a whole different deal. But let me also tell you that I have a sort of at least a 1 year minimum minimum optimism buffer. So my 1 year optimism buffer works like this. If it looks impossible, I still give myself a year. That's like a rule. It's like a system rule. Doesn't matter what the problem is. Doesn't matter how much it hurts. Doesn't matter how much I want it to stop. I'll give myself 1 year to just fix that thing.
Now, this is really interesting because obviously he's got this rule, and it's a good rule. 1 year is maybe a little arbitrary, but there it is. But it's interesting that in order to manage this little box of depression that he's in at the moment, he's got a rule. It's outside of him, and he's sort of and that's gonna help him hopefully not do anything. Well, not do anything what? Reasonable? I was going to talk about that in a minute.
So, don't worry, I'm going to check out early because I've got a year to fix this. But I can tell you, if I felt like this in a year, I would look to kill myself. So let me say it directly. If I feel like this next year, I'm going to look to kill myself.
Now this is a kind of rationalism. Now, if you pause and you ask yourself, what's the worldview underneath this? Now, obviously, there's depression. And this pattern of thinking is a depressed way of thinking. Now, he categorizes non-depressed ways of thinking as basically a little illusion, a little fiction around that says everything's going to be okay, when the horrible truth that no one will deny is that we're all going to be eaten by worms. Okay, the age of decay gets us all. That's sort of the rule of the world, right? The age of decay wins.
Because I don't want to live like this. Like I'm not going to do this I'm not going to do this 2 years.
And of course, he's assuming that his life is his own. It doesn't belong to anyone else. It's just his.
I'll do this 1 year. I'll give you 1 year with this amount of pain, and then next year, I'm not going to do 2 years. Promise you I won't do 2. Now, that doesn't mean I'll kill myself. It could just mean I'll go on different drugs.
And this is pretty typical for Scott. I mean, he'll say something and then he'll kind of hedge it in a different way.
Right. But, legal, illegal, whatever I have to do. Heroin, I would definitely do heroin. End it now. Somebody's suggesting that I kill myself right away.
And if you're familiar with YouTube comments, shouldn't come as a great surprise.
Thank you. Appreciate it. No, nothing's going to happen in the next year. So don't worry about me waking up tomorrow. Nothing's going to happen in the next year, for sure. Fentanyl, that'd be one way to go. Yeah. But by the way, if I do it, don't feel bad for me, okay? Because it'll be me getting what I want. Should it?
Now, he's just pretty much sort of laid out his life. This is life. This is his philosophy. Now, I do this in light of the talk that we've been having about collective relevance realization. We see the world through the eyes of others. We derive, construct, inherit our worldview through the perspectives of others. And he obviously, if you listen to him, he has a particular perspective on life. What is life? This is his worldview. This is his religion. That basically life is worth it if either I'm choosing, or I am enjoying, or I'm happy, and once the cost-benefit analysis in my evaluation is no longer worth it, then off I go. Now, it was fun because it was fun. I tweeted about this, and very interesting responses. One person basically said he's ill. And this gets into, again, the whole sanity question, because I think in some ways this whole framing is getting overwhelmed. And now in the next video, he's going to blame his depression on his blood pressure meds, which I've had plenty of experience with seniors who, when they get on too many medications, some medication will make them depressed, some medication will give them dementia, some medications will. I mean, I see that all the time with senior citizens because I pastor a church of a fair number of old people. So those things aren't unusual, but the question is, okay, what is the truth? And what is a wise way to live? And he very much seemed alone. Okay, so I can trust my siblings. That's sort of who it was boiled down to. Now, not all of you out there can trust your siblings. The person that sent this to me is a rando that he and I have had a conversation in the past. And he basically said, this is part of the reason I'm a Christian. Because one of the things that you get, if you cultivate it, if you invest in it, is a belief in a heavenly Father. Now, some of you are going to dismiss this as a sky daddy, but the utility of it, the functionality of it, when for one reason or another you're in a mood or in a place or in a situation that is making you think in a certain way, you want others outside of yourself that. But again, this is collective relevance realization. Someone might look at this and say, well, you live a number of years, and if you have good circumstance in life, you can maybe enjoy your life, have a degree of happiness, and get what you want. And so therefore, this gets into the theme of nature religion that I've been working through in 1 Corinthians. Therefore, if you can have good, pleasant, meaningful experiences between 0 and 80 or 90 or 100, however long you live, that's the goal. That is life. And I think this, again, has in some ways has a meaning crisis already built into it. Because the more power we get, the more control that we have over our moods, especially if we, like many, sort of try to regulate our moods and regulate our experience by managing our externalities in order to give us what we want, or perhaps we use chemicals one way or another that alter our moods or give us experiences or give us something or another. The whole point then of it is having a pleasant moment and having as many strings of pleasant moments on with each other. And of course, meaningful moments can be pleasant moments too, etc., etc. But the whole purpose of this is just simply contained within itself. Now let's hear him the day after.
The simultaneous happens now.
Now already, his camera's more in focus. He's got his coffee. His mood is better. This is the next day.
Go.
Enjoying life.
Are you ready for the optimistic morning that you've been craving? Not my usual, the world is ending morning. Are you ready for the biggest dose of optimism you've ever had in your life? Here it comes.
Now, I was just reading some of the comments on the previous video, and someone mentioned his wealth. So here's a guy who, he writes books right there on the shelf. Win bigly. He's got millions of dollars, more money than probably all but perhaps one or two of us who are watching this video, excluding myself. He's definitely got way more money than I do. He's got his siblings. Does he have any kids? I don't know. You can put that in the comments section. Struggled with marriage, apparently. Talks about his ex-wife. And, well, today's a better day. Well, that's a good thing.
Here it comes. Some of you have been, and I appreciate it, very concerned about me because I've said that I was in great pain every day, muscle aches, and could barely walk up the stairs. And I said to you that if this lasted, I was going to check out. meaning I didn't want to live in that much pain. But I also told you, and this is a pretty good advice, I would never do anything in less than a year. I would always give myself a year to work it out, right? No matter how bad it was, no matter how much pain I was in, I could make it last a year, just to see if I could solve it. And I saw, was it Matthew McConaughey? Or I saw somebody's father gave them advice. I think it was Matthew McConaughey, telling a story about his father giving him advice. And it was some of the best advice I've ever seen in my life. And I've actually tried to incorporate it, and it's immediately useful. And I guess you could call it a reframe. And here it is. Do one more. That's it. That's the whole advice. You can do one more. You would be amazed how often that little bit of advice changes everything. I tried
The troll in me can take that a whole different way.
it out at the gym. So normally when I go to the gym, I lift until, sometimes I'm counting. I know I should, but usually I don't.
There's a whole bunch of people in AA that have taken that advice, and that's why they're in recovery.
I stop when my arm is tired. And then I said to myself, when I normally would stop, I'd say, all right, could you do one more? And the answer is almost always you can. You can almost always do one more. And it's amazing how motivational that is. Anyway, back to me. So for the last several months, I've been in pretty much, discomfort. And it had gotten worse to the point where I have to admit, and I don't want to be banned from YouTube for saying things that would be controversial, so I'm going to try to say it as medically as I can, all right? I was overwhelmed with suicidal thoughts for the last several weeks. It's kind of all I thought about.
Several weeks?
Honestly, I didn't go a minute without thinking about it.
Good thing he doesn't have a 1 week rule. He's got a 1 year rule.
Now, I was never close, as in I never made a plan, never thought I'll put together my concept for doing it or anything like that. It's just that I couldn't get it out of my mind because my life was not up to the quality of life that would have made any sense to continue, right? Now, there's definitely an irrational ending of your life, but there's also a rational time to do it. Let's say if you had Lou Gehrig's and you were in pain and you only had a month to live anyway, there are rational reasons to put yourself out of pain. And I thought I was in one.
Right there. And I thought I was in one. I was the judge of this. So someone recently sent me this article, Scheduled to Die, The Rise of Canada's Assisted Suicide Program. What do you do when you discover your son has made an appointment for his death? On September 7, Margaret Marcilla called Joshua Tepper, the doctor who planned to kill her son. Marcilla is 46 and she lives outside of Toronto with her husband and daughter, a nursing student. She'd known that her 23-year-old son, Keanu Vafayan, was depressed. He was diabetic and had lost his vision in one eye, and he didn't have a job or a girlfriend or much of a future. And Marcilla asked her daughter to log into Keanu's account. Keanu had given his sister access so she could help him with his email. He never shared anything with his mother, what he was thinking, where he was going, and Marcilla was scared. That was when Marcilla learned that Keanu had applied and, in late July, been approved for medical assistance in dying, a.k.a. MAID, M-A-I-D, a.k.a. assisted suicide. His death was scheduled for September 22. In a September 7 email from Tepper, the doctor, to Keanu and Tekla Hendrickson, the executive director of MAID House, the Toronto facility where Keanu's death would have taken place, Keanu mapped out the schedule. Hi, he emailed. Apparently, Tepper did not use spell checker. He confirmed the timing. Please arrive at 8:30. I will ask for the nurse to be at 8:45, and I'll start the procedure Notice the medicalizing of it all. The procedure at 9 a.m. Procedure will be completed in a few minutes after it starts. Goes into details about this. Mother wasn't having it. Basically put enough pressure on the doctor, public pressure, that the doctor said, I don't want to have any part of it. Then suddenly nobody wants to have any part of it. So, yeah, I'll put a link to this article in here. Walks through a bunch of the different issues, and you can read it yourself. But this is part of the difficulty of being a human being, is that when we have choices, when we have minds, when we have perspectives, things look a certain way, and we are convinced.
I thought I was in one. So I felt depression and I felt pain and I could barely walk up the stairs. Do I sound better today? You can tell, can't you? Can't you tell?
Right away.
Yeah. Well, whatever was bothering me yesterday, you can tell it went away, right? It's obvious.
It's funny because a lot of people said, well, he's off his meds. No, the truth is he was on meds.
Do you think that I solved my problem by taking a med? Do you think that's what I did? Do you think I took some pharmaceuticals and solved my problem?
And again, this is going to cut both ways because some people really do need to stay on their meds.
In one day? No, you motherfuckers, I stopped taking this drug. And all my problems stopped. I fucking stopped.
All my problems stopped.
Stopped taking this. For one day. One day, everything's better. Everything. The suicidal thoughts, completely gone. Like it doesn't even make sense. Like my brain doesn't even know why I would even have those thoughts. Physical, completely fine. Walked 5 miles yesterday, half of it was uphill. No problem. No problem at all. And that was from the day before I was using the elevator in my own house. Yes, I have it.
Remember when he said, I don't think I'll ever exercise again? That's what he said.
An elevator. Because the stairs were too much.
He's got an elevator.
Much of a challenge. True story. One fucking day. Now, this was on my list if you were wondering how I solved it. And by the way, it's not solved. This is blood pressure meds. So my blood pressure is high right now. So I could still die.
So he could stroke out.
But it won't be today.
And in fact, if he has a stroke, that could lead to other mental impairments and perspectival differences.
Okay. So once it was really obvious that the meds were the problem, I Googled it.
When was it obvious? It obviously was obvious at some point and not at another.
And I Googled, it's a beta blocker. Yep, somebody's on it. So somebody Google this or already knows. There are two types of blood pressure meds. One kind, a study showed those people kill themselves more often than they should. There is literally a study saying that people who take drugs in this class, I'm not going to tell you the specific one, I'm only going to tell you the class because I don't want to get sued. It's in a class of beta blocking blood pressure meds. The other is an ACE inhibitor. I don't know what the trade-off is. But I have the kind where there's a 2019 study saying it'll make you suicidal. The fucking drug did this. Everything you saw of my complete personality change over the last 3 weeks, you all saw it, right? If you watch me every day, you can't miss it, can you? You saw my personality change, didn't you?
And what's even more interesting is that everyone saw the world through those eyes. And he's on every day, so everyone's going to see the world through whatever eyes are coming down the road, because today he's having a good day. Will the good days continue? We don't know. Because what he said in his truthiness in the depressed state was also true, that days come to an end. We all have an expiration date on us, and we do in fact expire. And so, what's my point? Sanity. What is sanity? How do we arrive at it? It's not individual. We do collective relevance realization, and increasingly we're doing it via the internet, via talking heads like this one and like this one. And that's just an extension of what we've always done. In fact, as I was listening to him this morning, when I was listening to both videos, I was thinking about how, in many ways, I mean, this has been going on in churches for a very long time. Pastors on stage and behind the pulpit have been individuals that do it, especially in some societies more than others. Ancestors do it. We do it through each other, but again, through human beings. This is the way it goes, and we're subject to this. Now, one of the questions is human beings versus institutions. Because part of, again, what a narrative doesn't get depressed. Now, your perspective on a narrative might be impacted by depression, but a narrative doesn't get depressed. A book doesn't get depressed. A system doesn't get depressed. And so what we tend to do is combine individuals through which we're sort of outsourcing parts of our relevance realization, and we're doing it as a community. So Scott is sort of the principality of the little community that's around Scott Adams and coffee. And the whole point of this is that, not completely, but to one degree or another, and again, the more you listen to him, the more, in a sense, you outsource your cognition, your relevance realization to him, and increasingly the entire community just becomes one collective thinking thing. Now, the power of mood then becomes pretty significant because, how does this mood impact people? Well, I did listen to this whole video, and I don't usually listen to him, but a little later in the video came across this, which I thought was quite interesting. Now, right before this, Scott had made a comment about, he was talking about Kanye, and I'm not saying I'm a Scott Adams hater. I thought some of his comments on Kanye here were very interesting because I've sort of been following the Kanye story, and I want to have more to say about the Kanye story. Kanye and Piers Morgan was a little unleashed, a little off the hook. I can understand why people listen to him and say things about sanity, but again, this sanity business is a very tricky business. I'd like to bring in, so I'm also one of the way too many books and things I'm listening to right now. One is on the Peloponnesian War and had a really nice section on Sparta. And it's very clear that in a community like Sparta, they're doing a lot of relevance realization and collective things together, and they put their worldview together as a community, and they maintain it as a community. That's what a society does. One of the little battles in my life is, of course, in my own denomination, the big fight over same-sex marriage that's going on right now and continues to go on. And I'm having conversations about confessionalism, because in a sense, what a confession does is helps the community sort of transcend itself and put into writing beliefs. Now, over time, confessions change because communities change beliefs, and part of the process of keeping a community integral and whole, or knowing when to separate or when to stay together, is this whole thing about outsourcing ourselves to confessions and beliefs and values that we sort of put onto paper. Why do we put them onto paper? We put them onto paper because they don't change, and we know that we're unstable, and we're all unstable. We all have mood changes. Now, what's fascinating sometimes when I'm talking to people who have legitimate diagnoses, and they might be on disability because of medical reasons and all of these different things, it doesn't mean when they open their mouth they don't speak the truth. Sometimes they speak the truth and sometimes they don't. As far as I can tell, that's true of almost all of us. Now, the rate of truth telling has a lot to do not only with, well, this is where we get into this collective relevance realization of consciousness, because one way or another, the whole community has to sort of do this together. And it was very interesting because I thought Scott Adams can have some really, I like Scott Adams. I like, again, the book on his shelf about success, I thought it was a good book. I thought there was a lot of wisdom in that book. There were a lot of insights. There were a lot of very interesting things in it. And so that's when he sort of came on my radar. And again, I don't listen to him every day. I often now mostly only listen to him when one of you sends me an email or DMs me on Twitter and says, "Oh, this one of Scott Adams," it sort of touches on what you're doing. And again, this is in a sense how my collective relevance realization is outsourced to many of you, and you inform me via the comments or on Twitter or on email or in a meetup or something like this. So then it's a fascinating couple of days with Scott Adams, and then getting towards the end of this, of course, he's always sort of reading the chats, and then this happens.
Jenny says, Scott, duped by batteries and green energy, thinks everything always improves like chip processing speed.
Now, he had made a comment about e-bikes, and, well, maybe I got to watch my time. He talked about Kanye had sort of his dream city. It's very interesting. In Scott Adams' dream city, a school is at the center, not a church. A school is at the center, and everything is sort of walkways and e-bikes and this kind of thing. And so he made a comment about e-bikes, and then someone took a shot at him in the live chat.
Does that sound like something I say? That I'm duped into believing that batteries
feeling well enough to be punchy
and green energy will improve like chip processing speed? Does that sound like something I said? You stupid bitch. By the way, if you haven't already noticed, in personal relationships, tell me if this isn't true. One-on-one, if you're talking to somebody in person, if a woman criticizes a man, the man will hold back. True or false? If a woman criticizes a man in person, the man will hold back. Of course. Now, not only will the man hold back physically, of course, because you're not going to create a fight, but you will hold back verbally as well, will you not? True or false? That a man will hold back verbally as well, because you don't want the husband to come over and punch your lights out and stuff like that. But here's the problem.
This is sort of Peterson's. What Peterson said in one interview when he said, especially for men, physical violence is always sort of in the back.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is just a hypothesis I'm developing. My belief is that women have taken that safety to the internet, and they believe they can shit on me without any pushback. And so
now I think he has a point here, because I think what he's saying is true, that at least in our culture, there is a degree of deference that has been built into the culture over it's, I believe, an achievement and a good one, that men sort of take a step back, and women can usually be more verbally assaultive. Men will be a little bit less sure of that. Now, again, this varies tremendously. Some of you maybe have lived with violent men but anyway, so he has a point here. But then again, he goes on to tell us exactly who he is and what he thinks. And I think this weighs into the whole part of the conversation that we're having about, well, how should we talk to one another?
So because I like to train them that that's not the case, as soon as they
he's a little master of the world. He's liking to train them.
Criticize me unfairly, I call them stupid cunts. Because I'm not going to hold back on social media. On social media, if you come after me, it's going to be 100%, well, I might even exceed what you did. Like if you come after me with a 8 out of 10 awfulness, I might give you a 10, and I wouldn't feel bad about that at all. Do you know why? Because I'm not a sexist. That's why. Because I did not grow up around weak women, right? My mother wasn't weak. My sister isn't weak. No women in my family were weak. So if you come at me hard, I'm gonna fucking slap you back on social media. In person, I would act the same way. In person, I would just suck it up. Because in person, you really do have to take, you do have to take into account there's a physicality difference there. And I would go easy on somebody who did not have a physical, equity with me. Like I would just treat them differently. But online, no, I have no filter online. If you come at me with bullshit, I'm going to come at you with everything I've got just for fun, right? And I don't even care about you. Just to be clear, I don't care about you at all.
Now, if you've ever had any interactions with him on Twitter, he's telling you the truth. This is how he behaves. This is what he does.
I just enjoyed the fact that you gave me a free punch. And then I thought, oh, free punch. I would love to call somebody a fucking piece of shit right to their digital face. It's fun. You should try it. Have you ever just seriously insulted somebody right to their face while they're live? It's way
He likes it. He thinks it's fun.
more fun than you think it is, because you don't get to do it in real life. But on social media, yeah, come at me.
Now again, the transformation from the day before is stark. The day before doesn't want to keep living, doesn't know if he'll ever exercise, that's depression talking, obviously. Now, feeling normal again. Tomorrow, don't know what we're going to get. Sanity and collective relevance realization. It's a lot to think about. Well, let me know what you think. Leave a comment.